Fryer and William Hewitt are here. Thank you for coming.
Suppose you are a juror listening to the testimony of a Cantonese-speaking witness during trial. Through an interpreter, you hear the witness say,
"Oh, that iron pear, he fried my squid."
What, you wonder, does that have to do with anything? The answer is nothing. It is a misinterpretation. The Consortium for State Court Interpreter Certification matters because every English and non-English speaking person in court should hear what is said without the meaning being distorted. A qualified interpreter would have interpreted that statement as,
"Oh, that bastard, he fired me."
Why there's a separate federal system for certification from what you're doing, and why these two systems shouldn't be combined?
Excellent question. The reason there is a federal system is because there's a federal law that says there will be. That law was enacted, I believe, around 1970. So it's driven by federal statute that charges the Administrative Office of the United States Courts to certify interpreters. That program has been in existence for about 20 years or more now. In the state program, there is no comparable system of state laws mandating that sort of certification program, except in a few states, California and a few others. So it was necessary to voluntarily build this program up.
If that's the case, I mean, first, I'm not quite sure why this couldn't just piggyback on the federal system, but if that's the case, if there's been a federal system for 20 years and some states have had their own certification system, what do you see as the innovation here?
Well, the innovation is, for the consortium, is the creation of an opportunity for the states themselves to come together, pool their resources into a single national testing system for the states. The states can't use the federal court system for a couple of reasons. They can't have access to the test because they're protected for security reasons. They've invested, the federal government spends over $400,000 a year on their testing program. What the innovation fundamentally is having made the decision to stop reinventing the wheel in each state, have each state spend, developing tests is expensive. So what we've decided to do is do it once and allow states to buy in.
I'd like to add that the federal program only has, I believe, 3 tests that they're testing in now.
The federal government certifies interpreters in Spanish, and on one occasion they tested in Haitian Creole, and on one occasion they tested in Navajo. That's the end of it. By now we test in 11 different languages and have about 17 different test forms. Keep in mind now our standard is different from the federal standard. The federal test is far more demanding in its scoring than our test is. They have a 4% pass rate over 20 years on their exam. Ours is, depending on how you measure it, around 14%, or in terms of people, it's about 25%.
Yeah, David Osborne.
I wanted to ask about replication. Clearly, it's a great idea, but your application says that already 76% of the non-English speaking population is covered in states that are included in your consortium. And the federal government has its own certification. So is replication then going to be limited to the other 24%? Is that the target audience?
That's a good question too. Clearly, we do have the goal of continuing membership to try to extend it to the rest of the states. But more importantly, this program has been focused on was initially focused on the issue of qualifications assessment and testing. As we've gotten into it, we run into really the much bigger question, which is how do we find people to pass these tests? How do we train people to pass them? How do we build up the cadre of interpreters that are needed in the country? And in this sense, what our replication efforts now, I think, want to extend out into the executive branch of government, into other sectors of the justice system, perhaps even social services generally, and start dealing with those hard questions. They need also qualifications assessments, and they don't have them, but also to deal with the hard question about how do we recruit people to this field, and how do we make it possible for interpreters to make a living doing this.
Could I add that what we offer beyond just the testing aspect is actually, for a state, how do you set up a program? For the federal government, that's not an issue. The Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts does it for them. For a little state like Delaware, it would be cost prohibitive for us to develop tests on our own and do anything effectively. But what we can do as a group is take advantage of the resources offered by the consortium, and that includes model code of conduct. That's why I spoke to, there's a very strong issue about what's expected, includes how do you discipline interpreters who are not following the code of conduct. And there's a lot of resources that we develop as a group which are then beneficial to all of our member states and can be adapted. For California as a member state, for example, obviously has a lot of different issues than Maryland, who is at a different stage in the process.
Ed Doran?
But can I just say about Maryland, we are so pleased that you're doing this, because we were passed laws that said our court should be, our people who appear before our justice system should have good interpreters. So I just want to thank you so much for your help on that.
Thank you. Ed Doran?
I'm glad you're here, because I think you're reminding us that there are still some very fundamental issues that our court systems are not attending to. This is one of them. It seems to me that the certification process addresses only one of several pieces of the problem. A prior piece of the problem has to do with generating a pool of people who have an interest in this as a profession, and it seems the back end of it would have to do with helping to distribute that pool. That is there a way in which your program allows a Vietnamese-speaking certified interpreter in the state of Maryland to be transferred over to Virginia if the need arises? There's some kind of job pool there.
Thanks. That's one of the things that I think our membership would spend the award money on, would be taking on, first of all, the challenge of developing a national database of certified interpreters, and secondly, developing a mechanism for telephonic interpretation, delivering services telephonically when possible. Those are high priorities of some of our members, and we simply haven't had the resources to develop them. The other thing that we're looking into, we're in the nascent stages of this, I've been meeting with some people, is to look at how we can bring together, as I mentioned, executive branch agencies who need interpreter services into all working out of the same pool, so that the assignments get concentrated. Instead of having a lot of interpreters who are not competent, in other words, pursuing safety is in a very long list of names of people who maybe are competent. We want a shorter list of qualified people who can make a living doing it.
For a good example is Minnesota has a large population of Hmong that speak Hmong. So we have a consortium test in Hmong. If there was a need for a Hmong interpreter in Texas, now that they are consortium members, we have a website. It's actually a listserv that we all subscribe to, we all talk to daily. So if you need a certified Hmong interpreter, you can get access to that name and that person, and you can fly them down, which is much more cost-effective and useful, as Bill indicated.
Yeah. Can I ask a question about Mr. Hewitt? You're a consultant to you're listed as a principal research consultant to the National Center for State Courts. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, do you live in Utah, sir?
No, I live in Williamsburg, Virginia, and I was wondering when that question would be asked about Utah.
Well, it's listed as the state of Utah.
Yes, the reason is that...
And we have Judge Griffin from Delaware, so I'm just
The
curious.
reason for that is the signator on our application is the Chief Justice of the state of Utah, who When you ask for a chief executive officer, as you do, our choice is, well, which one? Which of the 29 states do we go to? And it so happened that Chief Justice Durham was available the day we went looking for a Chief Justice to sign our application. And she unfortunately couldn't be here today. She's having, their court is in session.
Well, if you were to win the award, sir, where should we send the check?
We at the National Center will husband the money and account for it, and Patricia
we will
Griffin
spend
and
it.
the other states will decide how to spend it.
If we win it, we will make sure. You can send it to any of our 29 member states, and we will make sure it gets where it needs to be.
I see. All right. That's helpful. Yes, Carl, do you have a final question?
Yes, a final question. What, given the limitation in terms of resources, the number of interpreters who around the country who are qualified, is there any do you have any system of reciprocity? Is there a reciprocity with the federal system, and is there reciprocity with whatever other certification systems exist for interpreters in other areas?
Again, keep in mind that the consortium, everything about the consortium is voluntary. So the consortium doesn't dictate to states what their actual certification method is. So in point of fact, the states set out their own standards, and most states accept federal certification. If you can show that you're a federally certified interpreter, then you would be recognized as certified in the state. That's true in most states. It's not true in California, for example. And most states also subscribe reciprocally to the testing program. It's not reciprocal certification, it's reciprocal acceptance of the test itself, which is the big hurdle to overcome. So, and most of the states do that, and it saves them the time and expense of Ohio, or Texas doesn't have to test a certified interpreter from Florida.
Judge Griffin, Mr. Hewitt, and thank you. Congratulations.
Please let me have another half an hour or 2 hours to talk to you about this subject.